Hello, welcome to Brand X Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about the big one, Avengers Endgame. This is going to be a non-spoilers review, by the way, so don't worry about that. I'm going to assume you've seen the trailers, and at the end of the video I'm going to be mentioning whether or not there was or wasn't a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene, because I think you kind of need to know, you need to know whether it's worth staying. So I'll cover that at the end of the video, but that's about as far as I'm going to go in terms of spoilers. So, obviously this is a big one that we've been waiting for a long time, and the payoff in this was great. I was in no way disappointed. A lot of reviewers have been saying that about this, that obviously this is the culmination of everything. We said that about Avengers Infinity War, and that still remains true, but this one obviously is pretty much part two, so and concludes things. Which I'm going to get into as well. I'm going to get into the future of the franchise towards the end of the video, because obviously this pretty much has left things in a place now where major changes in the MCU will be seen. Not just like we saw after Captain America Civil War, where pretty much like people went separate ways. That was a big change. This is very different, but I'll get into that without spoilers. So basically, like I say, it was in no way a letdown in the slightest. People are going to be wondering who's going to die in this, who's going to survive it. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that at all, or even give any hints. But one thing I will say is that some of the guesses that I personally have made were quite way off what happened in this, and I'm glad, because I was kind of self-aware that whatever I guess I was probably going to be wrong anyway. I wasn't banking on anything being the case, but I think if you go into this with those kind of expectations, you know, you're going to be thinking like, well, this person's contract's expired and they're the kind of character that will go out in a blaze of glory, so they're going to die and I want to see a good death scene for them. They might not even die, you know, or it might be on the other side. This is a character that I think they've got a good future. We know that this is what they're going to do in the future and they're going to be needed for that. They might die, you never know. So be ready for some surprises anyway. But overall, the feel of this, obviously with the ending of the last one, it was a very sombre ending, and it had to be, and it was very effective, and we've been living with that for a year now as well. So obviously the reality to us of this universe that they created was one of disaster and tragedy. So with this one, to have some kind of optimism there, again without going into spoilers or hinting too much, this one does leave things in a lot happier a place. Now, whether or not that's because things got undone, or whether or not that's because they just got revenge for things, I'm not going to say. But rest assured, it's a happy ending, and obviously it was going to be anyway, so it's just a case of how are they going to get there. I'll let you decide, because watching this has been a real it was a real experience. I think everybody in the cinema was feeling it. Really sad that there was a grown man sat behind us crying. I think there were a couple of people crying, you could hear it, but there was one behind us and he was crying. It sounded like he was having an accident in his pants towards the end of the film. It was really embarrassing. He was sat behind us going, like that. It was just, it was embarrassing. He's like, seriously, do you need to just like take 5 minutes, you know? And then he was like crying as well. Oh man. Don't react like that. If you're going to go in the cinema and do that shit, wait a couple of weeks and let the normal people that are going to go see this film enjoy it, because I could have lived without that, to be honest. As much as it's nice sharing enjoyment of something, it brings people together, because you can just sit with total strangers and pretty much be in the same place as them. They've been waiting for this film just as much as you have. So I think this film is a really good shared experience that a lot of people can talk about and relate to. Because we went to TGI's straight after the film, and it's not particularly near the cinema, but the people at the next table were talking about the film in context that they'd just been to see it as well. So that's kind of encouraging, really, that this is something that a lot of people like, really. So that was quite good. But yeah, don't spoil the film. If you have seen it, seriously, I'm so glad that I didn't hear a single spoiler about this movie going into it. But I was quite clever and just stayed out of the comment sections Just generally stayed out of comment sections of anything in general, because a lot of these things will just get dropped in some random place. Because people just like to do that. They're just sad and they just get their jollies out of bothering other people. So if you are going to go see this anytime soon, stay away from the comment sections before you go see it. And again, don't ruin it for other people, because if you are, that makes you kind of a dipshit, in my opinion. But that's why you're doing it, isn't it? So kind of pointless me saying that. But anyway, that's pretty much it in terms of the general feeling of the film and whether or not I enjoyed it. So now, like I say, I'm not doing spoilers, but the mid-credit, post-credit scene thing that they do, I'm going to cover whether or not there is one now. So if you don't want to know that, turn the video off here. There you go, I've told you. Right, there is no mid-credit scene, there is no post-credit scene, there is nothing there. I think that's a good idea, because I think if you do that, it leaves you with an impression of something else that's coming. Because usually, not always, but usually these post-credit or mid-credit scenes basically foreshadow something that is to come. But I think the tone of this film is it's the end. So, I mean, to be honest, it's not the end, obviously. There's still Spider-Man Far From Home to come in a few months. And from what I understand, that film is set after this. So, it's not the end, but I think that they wanted to have a sense of finality to this. And I think if you put in a post-credit scene, even if it's not foreshadowing something that is to come, that's what you're ultimately ending on. And the end of this film, the last scene of this film, kind of has to be the last scene that you see when you go out of the cinema. So I think that's a good call that they did that there's nothing there. So obviously I'm spoiling the film, but I'm not really, because there is nothing to spoil, that's the point. But, and also, you don't want to kind of get your hopes up and then be disappointed, so it's best if you know now that there's nothing there. That's my take on that anyway. So finally, in terms of what is to come next, in terms of movies, apart from Spider-Man Far From Home, which comes out in July, we don't know what's coming next. We've got a pretty good idea in some instances, and we can make some pretty educated guesses, but there is nothing officially pinned down, which is kind of weird and makes me think that there must be quite a gap after Phase 3 is done. Now, I thought that Endgame was the last film of Phase 3, and that Spider-Man Far From Home was the first film of Phase 4. That was pretty much what was being said up till recently. But that's been changed officially. Kevin Feige, from what I understand, said in an interview, no, Spider-Man Far From Home is now the last film of Phase 3. So basically, put it this way, whenever you go to see a Marvel film, there's usually 2 or 3 other films. In recent years, there's been 2 or 3 films that are actually currently being shot at that time. Usually at any one time, there are 2 or 3 Marvel films that are being filmed. But at this moment in time, unless they're doing it secretly, the only film that is currently in production is Spider-Man Far From Home, which is out in 3 months pretty much. So if there was anything that was coming out in the next year or so, not only would we know about it, it would be being filmed. If there was going to be a film out this time next year, which usually there is a film in sort of end of April, last week of April, it's usually when it comes out, going back to the first Iron Man, I think. And that's when they bring the films out. But if the film for 2020, for April 2020, was coming out, that would be being filmed right now. It would have been well underway already. There hasn't even been an announcement for what that's going to be as yet. So I imagine the next film after Spider-Man Far From Home, which would be the first film of Phase 4, will be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But we don't know that. It was originally going to be out early next year, but obviously all the stuff with James Gunn delayed that, but he's back on board now. So I think there's going to be a gap, to be honest. I think after Spider-Man Far From Home, they're just going to give people a breather, and then when they do bring these movies back, whether or not it's late 2020, at least then it'll have been a while for people, so people can kind of sit with things and they can just basically refresh the franchise, which is what is needed, because everything was building up to this. It's like, and the next film out in another 6 months. I think people get tired of that, and I think they need to take a new direction as well, in whatever form that takes shape. I hope it's not Captain Marvel, because unless they revamp her character drastically and just say, look, can you kind of smile maybe when you're fighting, you know, the villains, kind of like Gal Gadot did with Wonder Woman, which I'm not a massive fan of, by the way, but I can't deny she was a better performance. I don't know. I see what form that takes in terms of the new face of, well, not the new face of the MCU, because, you know, all spoilers aside, there are still, you know, there's continuity from the films that have come already. I mean, I don't think that's a spoiler. There's plenty to work with, but I really don't know exactly what direction they're going to take. I imagine there's going to be more cosmic stuff in there. Guardians of the Galaxy 3, that could have any of the other characters that we've seen so far, possibly, depending on where they go with that. So we'll see anyway. Right, I'll leave it there anyway. I will do an actual spoiler review shortly, so if you check back Brannick's reviews, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.